Hi, Jason.
Hi, Josh.
How you doing?
Doing well. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Let me introduce us. I'm Josh Summers, a meditation and yoga teacher based in Boston, and you are Jason Siff, a former Buddhist monk, also a meditation teacher, a head teacher at the Skillful Meditation Project. And as a teacher, you've developed a style of meditation that you call recollective awareness meditation, which we'll be getting into. You teach workshops and retreats worldwide. And you are the author of a few books on meditation. Your first was Unlearning Meditation, What to Do When Instructions Get in the Way. And your more recent book is called Thoughts Are Not the Enemy, An Innovative Approach to Meditation Practice. So as these titles suggest, in this conversation we're going to be looking at meditation and specifically looking at your approach to meditation and exploring how it differs, complements, contrasts more conventional or other styles of meditation. In the interest of transparency and full disclosure, I should say that while I've been practicing meditation for many years, a few years ago I did come across your writing and your teaching. I went on a retreat with you and have been impressed and intrigued by this style of meditation because it really is quite different from a lot of other styles. So I am going to be interviewing you from the inside in a way about this practice, and hopefully present it in a way that might appeal to people that have been doing other practices or just feeling like they're struggling with their practice, because a lot of times I think people when they meditate don't feel very accomplished or don't feel very confident in their capacity for meditation practice. So to start out, one of the things I thought we could do is just look at kind of a conventional way that people view meditation, or how most people hold what meditation is, and then lead into how your approach starts to differ. I don't think this is too much of a generalization to say that most people think of meditation as something that you do where you sit down in a quiet room, either on the floor or in a chair, and you follow an instruction, something like you watch the breath, feel your breath, notice the breath. When your mind wanders, thoughts intrude into your practice or come into your mind, at that point you let those thoughts go and you gently return your attention to the breath. Now it could be the breath that you focus on, it could be a mantra or a syllable that you repeat, but usually there's some sort of focal object that the practitioner brings their attention back to again and again and again. And if they're able to do it, they feel like their meditation is going well. If they're not able to do it, they feel kind of inept or incompetent or frustrated, or there's tension in their practice. And I think that's the conventional view. In contrast to that, your approach kind of looks like the whole thing stands on its head in some ways, some respects. So why don't you talk about a little bit about your approach to meditation instruction?
Okay, thank you, Josh. What I teach for many people at the beginning is a form of sitting meditation practice, although people can lie down. And instead of trying to bring your attention to the breath, I really suggest that people become aware of their body sitting, the touch of their hands on their legs or feet touching the cushion or some contact of their body, and allow their thoughts and feelings into the sitting, to not really try to stop your mind or try to focus on your body or your hands, but to really be kinder to yourself, to start the sitting with a sense of ease and gentleness around what it is you're experiencing. And what I found in people practicing this way is that they're much more able to be aware of some of their thoughts and feelings, to be more, accepting and kind to themselves as they meditate. And when they do bring their attention back to their body, they might get a sense of why they're doing it. They might get a sense that they're bringing it back because they feel they should be, or that a certain kind of thinking has been going on too long. That there's some sense of taking, that you're responding to things in your experience when you're trying to get your mind just to be still or in one place. And so the way I see this over time is that people actually begin their meditation practice with thinking not being a problem. It's not a distraction anymore. It's included from the outset. And by being included from the outset, it takes a different form. And this kind of practice, I would say, is more of an open awareness type practice where you're not trying to control or direct your experience as much, but you're being more receptive and open to what occurs when you sit down to meditate.
Okay, good. So a few things from that. You described it as an open awareness practice. And so for people that may not be aware of different styles of meditation practice or different techniques of meditation practice, broadly speaking, would you agree that there's sort of open awareness or awareness-based styles of practice where you're intending just to cultivate a quality of awareness or an open perception of things that are coming and going in your experience versus a more concentration-focused practice or practice that emphasizes concentration where you're trying to exclusively focus on one thing and sort of hone in on that one thing?
Basically, a lot of meditation practices about where you place your attention and how your attention works on your experience. And so most meditation instructions that people receive are instructions about where to place your attention, on your breath, on your mantra, on your body, and how to do it. Count your breath or scan your body for sensations. But the instruction is basically first to put your attention on a specific area of experience and know that more fully.
And you chose in your approach, you choose the body, like you said, the hands or the body sitting, sense of the body sitting. Is there a reason for that you choose that over the breath?
The reason I choose that is because when you bring your attention back to your body while you're meditating, you don't have to locate it. You don't have to locate the touch of your hands or your touch of your feet. It's there. When you come back to the breath, you have to find: am I breathing in, breathing out? Am I in between breaths? You're getting caught in often in a way of trying to notice each breath going in and out, and maybe some ideas about what awareness of the breath is. Well, with the body, it's more or less neutral. You don't have really any ideas about the body, about how it should be, perhaps, except maybe if you're a little hunched over, you might correct and straighten up. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, you might find that coming back to the body, you don't feel busy by it. You feel like it's a still place. Another side to it too is that awareness of the body does not conflict with awareness of thoughts and feelings as much as awareness of the breathing. It's very hard to be aware of your thoughts and feelings, especially your thinking, while also being aware of your breath. It seems like thinking becomes more of a distraction to us, more irritating when we're trying to be aware of something else, like the breath, something that's moving and changing. Whereas with the body, you might find it's less of a problem. It can just kind of go on.
So in service of an awareness-based style of meditation where you're intending to include or be inclusive of all elements of your experience, whether it's thoughts, feelings, memories, and body and other sounds, you're saying that the body is less of a hang-up for being aware of these other things. It creates less of an obstacle to being aware of these other experiences.
Exactly. It creates less of an obstacle, and your body will, especially the external contact of your body sitting, or a touch of your hands will feel like a foundation, like a base that your attention can come back to at any point. Right. And that the purpose of this is actually to allow your thoughts to go on and to see what happens when you allow thinking and meditation. And there's another side to this too, is that say in a practice where you're continually bringing your attention back to the breath, you're very active in trying to stop your thoughts and come back to your breathing and sort of control your experience. Here in this kind of approach, we're kind of trusting, I'm allowing my thoughts to go on. I'm aware of my body at times during the sitting. I may also be aware of sounds and other things that are, within my awareness. And you might find then that seems to inform you about what's going on in your meditation practice. It is your meditation sitting. Awareness of what is going on becomes the hallmark of your meditation practice.
Okay. Right. The awareness of what's going on becomes the hallmark of your meditation practice. Now, there's a view about how one wants to become aware of things, or how wants to attend to things, particularly when we come to our thinking. In a mindfulness approach, usually there's this idea that we can become aware of your thinking as it's occurring in real time. So as the thoughts are unfolding, you could stand back as a detached witness to the unfolding of the contents of your consciousness in a very straightforward, kind of easy manner, as though it were easy. When my experience of coming to this practice was that I, in some ways, had developed a really strong habit of grounding my attention in sensory experience. So I could focus on my body and get very established in that, to the point that if I did see a thought emerge, it kind of burst that thought like a bubble. Like it would just wouldn't go on. I think in your language, it might get the thought stream would be interrupted at the moment of recognition that it was occurring. And in tacking into your approach, I found that actually it took a long while for myself to let thoughts go on. So one of the things that I think is stylistically unique about this approach is that when thoughts go on, you might not necessarily be aware of them while they're occurring. In other words, you get lost in the thoughts, right? And a lot of people might raise the flag and say, that doesn't sound like meditation. Getting lost in thoughts, how does that qualify as meditation? Isn't that just going to produce more thoughts, or lead to greater perseveration, or just spin into sort of spirals of anxiety and fear and all these things? Like, so how do you answer that? How do you answer to that?
Well, first of all, I put it up as a question, to question the view whether or not my thinking in meditation is actually going to lead to more thinking, or it's going to spiral out of control, or it's going to be a real problem. I think many meditation practices are basically advocating some kind of clean state of mind where there should be no thinking, and so people are trying to get to that place instead of to see, how their mind actually is, how it actually is working, inside meditation, and then maybe be clear about how certain things are going on outside of meditation. To use the meditation a bit as a laboratory to see and understand, experiment with one's inner experience. So when it comes to this notion of thinking, what I write about a good deal in Thoughts Are Not the Enemy is that we often really don't know what the thinking is about, where it's going when we first have a thought. That thinking may actually have a trajectory to it. And that thinking is not just arising in the moment out of nowhere. Many times it's a thought that's reoccurring, or a train of thought that's, in a sense, that has not been finished. And that we are, in a way, with our experience around thinking, not going to become aware of it until we get a sense of it in its kind of larger, a larger period of time, a larger scope. And that's one of the reasons why this approach is called recollective awareness meditation. That in order to get a sense of thinking, I believe you need to be able to let thoughts go on and see where they lead, and then reflect back on them to develop real awareness of thinking. Real awareness of thinking in the moment is often just going to be shutting down the thinking. Right.
And that was a sort of a real eye-opener to me around awareness of thoughts. Developing awareness of thoughts is that, just as you said, it can't really be done in present moment, real time. That there's an ideal that gets purveyed in meditation circles that you can be aware of thoughts but not be lost in thoughts. And
exactly, and that's the thing, is that is being, there becomes just two things. There's being mindful or being unmindful. You're caught up in thoughts, or you're completely free of thoughts. There's no middle ground to really be with your thinking, to explore it and to learn about your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's no kind of giving enough time to become that self-aware to understand what may be a particular kind of thought pattern, what's fueling it, what's keeping it, what keeps this kind of thinking alive. What are some of the stories that are going on in this thinking that I actually believe in and that I might act upon? And this is not a simple thing. It's not like something that's going to like a light bulb's going to go off immediately when you're sitting and understanding a whole pattern of thought. It may take some time being with recurring thoughts to get a sense of really what they're about and where they're going. And that's something which will happen in meditation, that meditation is, in our minds of meditation, there's going to be a lot of repetition. We can't avoid the fact that we're going to be thinking and feeling and going through the same things again and again. Many practices, I think people get the idea that all of that should stop, when people's experience of meditating is that of course doesn't stop. Even the most advanced meditators keep having the same thoughts pop up again and again.
Right. And rather than sort of labeling those recurring thoughts as just thoughts or sort of repetitive monkey mind, or there's some sort of disparaging frame that's given to thinking. Your approach seems to treat it head on, to look right at it, and which actually leads to a theme that we don't necessarily need to get into too much now, but this theme of spiritual bypassing, which is one where people use a technique to go around things that bother them or that are painful. They think if I can just focus on the breath long enough, my pain, my anxiety, my worry is going to fade off or slough off, and I'll be in a better position. I'll have a better state from which I can deal with my life. And yours is more direct. It sort of says, let's face this head on and look around it, look above it, below it, and see what's fueling these challenging dynamics.
Right, exactly. So that the idea here, I believe, is that, and you can, I would suggest you try it out for yourself. That meditation really needs to be tested, to be understood, as much as we can talk about it. But you could try an experiment of allowing your thinking to go on longer than you have in your meditation sitting, and question some of the ways you've noted it as, say, planning or sleepiness or boredom, and say, well, what is going on that I call planning here? Am I looking forward to talking to somebody about this over a certain topic over lunch? Is it a work project? Is it a vacation that I'm looking forward to? Those are different kinds of experiences. To sum them up under one word as planning, I believe distances you from what it is you're really thinking about, from that experience that you're having. So in this kind of approach, what I suggest is that people reflect back on their experience of meditation after the sitting and try to write fuller descriptions around what went on. And I believe that will bring them closer to what is really going on inside of them, a much clearer understanding of their mind and feelings and intentions and memories. And that whole issue of bypassing is not going on. There isn't a sense of I'm trying to, suppress these plans now so that I can stay with my breath. It's more like, oh, I'm planning. I'm going to be kind and gentle to my mind that's planning. It's all right. It's not a problem. It's what I do. Let's see where this goes. And afterwards, I will have more awareness around it. And during it, I might start to develop real acceptance or a sense of tolerance for those experiences that I haven't had before. Mm-hmm. I think many meditation practices also produce a sense of intolerance to internal states of mind and types of thinking.
Right. And that leads into some of your theories around meditative process in general. Like what kinds of mental dynamics go on while people meditate, which I'd like to come into in a second. But before that, maybe more broadly, because everything you're describing really points to a different sort of rationale or premise for why one might be meditating. I think the standard approach is one where meditation is kind of a self-therapy, a self-driven therapy, where you do a technique to attain or change, have a state change of some sort. So you get into a more optimal or more pleasant state. But in your approach, where the intention is to be receptive and allowing of normal occurrences, your experience of thoughts, feelings, memories, letting yourself get into this, that's leading to the person into a different experience or different types of experience, but also moving towards a different development in relationship to the experience.
Yes, well, that's a key point. What you just said at the end is the experience might not actually be a problem for us. It's the way we're relating to it.
Right.
So we may find that, it's not a problem for us to sit with some angry thoughts if we're relating to the angry thoughts in a way that we're kinder to them, we're friendlier towards that anger. And that might look like you're fueling it at times. It might look like you're caught up in it. But you might then also get a sense that you are meditating with it. You're not, out there ranting and raving. You're basically sitting with it. You're holding it. There's a certain kind of restraint around it. So that what I'm kind of saying here is that you trust things within your own meditative experience that you've developed for you to be able to sit with things that most people would think you should not be sitting with,
Right. And then that second part is that after you actually go through the formal meditation, which is unguided, unstructured, just allowing things to occur as they occur, after that goes on, you advocate or recommend a kind of period of time of reflection, which is the recollective part, correct? Where you
Yes.
might either just think back through your experience of meditation or literally write down whatever you can recall from the practice as a way of gaining more insight around those experiences after the fact.
Exactly. So that my sense of it is that we develop awareness also through memory, and that recollecting your meditation experience and finding language for it, especially language that may be a bit new, a slightly different metaphor or word, way of describing things that seem to get closer to it. Language will never get completely accurate around our meditation experience, but it can help us explore it a bit more. And then when we sit again, you might find that there's a more natural awareness around those experiences. We've developed a kind of familiarity by having recollected our meditation experiences afterwards. And this is something you can just try. You can. Many people have already done this for years using, with dream journals and other ways of reflecting back on their experience so that they can go into it a bit more and then become more aware when similar experiences occur in the future.
Yeah, I don't know what you'll think of this analogy, but whenever I try to explain this to people, I compare it to what athletic teams do in recording their performances and recording their games. After they play, they'll get into the locker room or in a practice time and watch the tape. They watch the recording, and they're able to see things about their performance that they couldn't see in real time.
Yes.
And then they gain insight around that experience, and then hopefully apply it to the next iteration of a game experience. So there's a loop of learning in a certain sense.
A loop of learning, and that's the thing. You can one of the ways of looking at meditation is to consider meditation as a form of learning, as a form of self-learning, not just maybe self-therapy or as a way to get into certain blissful states of mind, but as an ongoing, lifelong process of learning about yourself.
Right. Okay, so that's the general idea of your approach, but behind it there's would you consider, first off, would you consider this style of meditation that you've developed to be syntonic with Buddhist meditation? I mean, is it based on Buddhism, Buddhist theory,
Yeah.
or is it something totally orthogonal to that?
No, it's I would say it's it came out of my own Buddhist practice as a monk and my own training in the Mahasi method of mindfulness.
And just to review that for folks that don't know the Mahasi method, how do you describe that?
Usually it's taught as a practice of noting. basically noting that you're hearing, seeing, touching, noting when you're walking, that your feet are, rising, moving, placing, that you're trying to note each part of your experience. Okay. And develop awareness in the present around that. And that Mahasi Sayadaw, the Burmese master who developed that approach, even wrote about ways of noting thoughts, of letting some of your thoughts go on and noticing different things that you were aware of. And I believe what that method was originally about was trying to help the meditator develop a very broad awareness of all parts of their experience and understand how experiences may be held together, how there's some kind of connectedness going on inside of us around the different things that are going on, and that in the end, we would start to see that there isn't a self, but there is a combination of conditions.
A process of things occurring rather than a
process of
fixed entity within that process.
Yeah.
Okay. So from that background, what led you to start to innovate on the system?
What led me to innovate on the system was a few things. First of all, when I heard other meditators' sittings and also was journaling my own, I found that there was a lot that I left out, and that there was a way that the language and the kind of parsing out of experience seemed to limit me as to really what I could know. If I just kept looking at certain states of mind as desire or certain sensations as pleasant or unpleasant, that might help for a little while, but it didn't necessarily help me understand certain things about those experiences. So I felt the language to be very constrictive, the terminology and the labeling.
Right, and I might even frame it that the methodology itself is limiting in that it cuts things out, in the sense that my experience of this was that often in a mindfulness-based approach, if you say you have anger, you're meant to label it as anger. So there's a cognitive frame around it, but then you're meant to direct your attention to the sensation in the body that correlates to that anger, and that, in some respects, that sensation itself is elevated as a more true piece of the experience.
Right, exactly.
It's like that's the real thing. It's just a sensation or a pattern of sensation. If you can hold that, if you can be with that, you'll develop a kind of equanimous stance in relationship to it, and you will no longer be tricked or fooled by the mental experience of anger or irritation. Mm-hmm. Right, and I still get angry still, and
right, exactly.
it didn't really work. Like it was a spot treatment in a way, but
it is. It's a way of, in a sense, trying to locate something mental or emotional in the body, which is a very common thing that people have done with meditation practices. But that is only a part of the picture. And then people feel, well, if I work with the sensation of my body, then I'm working with actual anger at its root. That's also, I think, a bias in that kind of approach. I would say that the way of working with things like angry thoughts is to actually address them in the level of thought and emotion and body. That right. They're all three connected.
Yeah.
And to really start to get a sense of, well, what are the thoughts that are going on here? Can I start to pick up, get inside those thoughts, and maybe at times find myself just a little bit outside of them enough that I see how I'm thinking about this particular person in an angry way, and what it is that keeps reminding me things about this person or situation that brings up the anger or that contributes to it. And that's what I mean by looking at some of the things that are fueling our thoughts, is that we may not be clear or really be able to see what keeps our thinking going. And if we have a pat answer, then we're no longer interested. We're not exploring anymore. And a lot of these approaches, like the Mahasi method, they keep giving people language and answers and techniques to do things about the experience, which I believe, at first might bring a certain level of awareness in a particular area, but in the end, you stop looking further. You become indifferent. Mm-hmm. And an important feature of recollective awareness practice for me is that the quality of interest is maintained. That you become interested throughout your practice, even interested in things that are repetitive, and find that is what reduces aversion. That is actually even what reduces certain kinds of craving. When you're interested in something, you're not trying to push it away or hold on to it. You're actually examining it.
Right, and connected or an outgrowth of that interest, curiosity is a kind of a willingness to reevaluate, too.
Right. Reevaluate what you've thought and believed about those experiences. Reevaluate the judgments you have. So instead of trying to stop judging, become aware of judging. Mm-hmm. Because we're all going to be judging. There's no way around it. That's part of a nature of being a self-aware human being, is that judgments will arise quite a bit when we become aware of things. Right.
And that, you've picked up on that, the theme of this issue of non-judging, which is sort of the one of the key defining parts of the mindfulness definition these days, that if you're mindful, you're not judging your experience, except you suddenly also become aware that you're judging yourself for judging or something like that. And that was another piece of your approach that I found. Well, I found it interesting in the sense that I hadn't seen these things, how they operated for a long time. But what might be what they call a double bind in a meditation instruction. And mm-hmm. I've shared this with other people, and invariably they're like, I can't believe I never saw that before. But a double bind is certainly sort of two competing instructions within one instruction, where you're told to do one thing, and then at the end of the breath, you're told to do something else. For example, be in the present moment, but don't be judgmental. Mm-hmm. Usually when you're trying to be in the present moment, you're trying to limit the scope of your experience to real-time events like sounds, sensations, things you can observe right in the here and now. And then if you become aware of yourself lost in thinking about the future or past, you're told to bring yourself back to the present moment, to the sensory present moment. But to do that involves an act of judgment and discrimination that you were lost from not connected with the present moment. So there's kind of, once I started to realize this, I saw that it's a little bit like trying to walk with your shoes tied to each other. It just can't really be done.
Well, that's why most people in that situation will follow the instruction that, in a sense, makes the most sense, the one that seems to be the right one, the primary one, and disregard the secondary one. So people could be practicing mindfulness meditation and getting the instruction, bring your attention back to your breath at the nostrils when your mind wanders. And then in the next breath, the teacher is telling them, but really, be accepting of yourself and of your experience, in its totality while you're meditating. Okay? What happens is that people follow the instruction of bringing their attention back to the breath and have this philosophy of accepting their experience in its totality while they're meditating, but not accomplishing it. Mm-hmm. Because you can't if you keep stopping your experience as it's unfolding. Bring your attention to your breath, or doing any kind of intentional practice basically populates your meditation practice with reminders. We think it's judgments, but actually it's like a continual reminder. It's a mindfulness bell that's going off every few seconds saying, you're doing the wrong thing now, you need to be on the breath. And that's how people tend to train in many of these practices, and feel that in itself is compatible, or doing the same thing as a practice which just allows you to be, say, lazy, to drift, to have whatever goes on in your sitting, which to me is the beginning of opening up to your full range of experience. And wait, where do you actually give up enough control over your experience to be with it, and yet also have something that holds you? Like a simple thing of, I can always go back to the touch of my hands. I can, I will become aware of the sounds at times. I will come back, but but I also will allow things to go on in my mind, in my body that are occurring right now. I'm not going to try to stop any process, even falling asleep while I'm meditating.
Right, and that's another piece of your approach that I think gets underdeveloped in other styles. In that, in other styles of meditation, the authority really is in the practice itself or the teacher. Like you're just meant to, as a student or as a practitioner, you're meant to more or less go along with the script. And in an unscripted practice where you're trying to open up and just be present to the totality of your experience going on, you as the meditator have choices. Constantly you're faced by constant choices around what you do with your experience. Do you let it go on? Are you letting it go on? Or do you bring your attention back to something else? Or do you move into something else? Or do you explore something else? So you're
having choices.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Whereas other practices, you only have one choice: bring your attention back to your breath, or replace your angry feelings with feelings of loving kindness, or something like that. Here, you're stuck with our human condition of, there are various choices we can make. And let me see, today, if I make a slightly different choice, what happens? That's the only way I can think we can start to learn some difference between skillful and unskillful choices. It's not a clear-cut thing of good and bad choice. There are different conditions, different concerns, different ideas around particular choices, and we might find that we may need to do that to see where it goes. This is not a risk-aversive practice. This is a practice of taking risks.
Mm-hmm. Right, and learning from
them,
the effects of those choices.
Exactly. How else do you think people discovered various meditation practices? Do you think they just did it mechanically and then they a certain thing, and then they had certain experiences? Most likely, the innovations in meditation came from people who've deviated from the norm and actually were really interested in what started to occur when they did.
Right.
And that's one reason why I see this kind of approach as highly individualized. I'm not trying to put out any model or categorization or stages or anything for everybody to fit into, but rather address the individual's own inner development in meditation.
And even though it's very individually stylized, or based on in a certain sense, you said this once when I was on retreat with you. You said, in this approach, rather than trying to sort of explain one's practice or speak about one's practice based on a sort of a scaffolding of meditative language, the whole practice is built around the student's actual experience while meditating. Like, forget the language, forget the terminology, but just what is the student's actual experience, which I found very interesting. And where was I going to go with that? I think I just lost my thought.
Okay, well, part of their actual experience is their experience in their own words. Once a student learns a vocabulary around meditation and puts their experiences into that language, they're using, in a sense, foreign terminology. They're trying to understand their experience using other concepts. Is this a calm state of mind? Is this emptiness? Is this a jhana? They're trying to get their experience, to see if their experience fits something that they've read about or heard about. But if you describe whatever you're experiencing in your own words, you're getting closer to how you know yourself, how you know your inner world. And so that's the direction I would prefer people try to go into when they talk about their meditation practice. Talk about it in ordinary language. Doesn't have to be puffed up in any way.
I remember my thought that I had before. It's that even though this whole approach starts out very individualistic, and it can seem like it's going almost 180 degrees in the opposite direction from what other meditation styles recommend, there is a way that this practice does lead into what you might call classical or traditional meditative territory, right? Whether it's calm states, samadhi states, which samadhi states being deep states of concentrative absorption. For me, that was actually quite surprising, in that usually when you try to get calm, it's set up that you have to work really hard to develop that. You have to go away into like a cave somewhere or be on retreat for weeks and weeks and weeks. And after doing these arduous practices of watching your breath and bringing your attention back again, then and only then does a calm state visit upon you. But here, it was very strange to see that you could let your mind, or I could let my mind just literally wander and go into all these different territories and would still get into these deep states of absorption spontaneously, or, I think your language is that you kind of stumble into them. Mm-hmm. So there is these. It's not that this style is sort of completely against the grain of other experiences in meditation. It includes these other things. It just opens up the whole field a little bit more. Exactly.
The difference is that people are arriving at these, say, calm states of mind, or even awareness of their breathing, their breath going in and out, when the conditions are right. That they're not trying to control or make it happen. They just find that the conditions in their experience are such that that's what is happening. So it would be the difference, like an awareness of breathing, where in a classic approach, you would say, put your attention on your nostrils and notice the touch of the breath going in and out. In this approach, you might find that you've been meditating and thinking about things for a while and maybe drifting a bit and being aware of your body and sounds. And then suddenly you might just hear your breath, or you notice your diaphragm rising and falling, and that you're with your breath for a few seconds, and you're getting the benefits of that kind of practice, of that experience. But then we're not holding on to it and saying, well, now I'm going to just stay with the breath for forever. We might actually be looser with it and say, okay, I'm with this now, and this is going on. And when it goes, I'll be on to something else and something else again. That there's a real flexibility here, a willingness to change and to move on within our experience instead of trying to hold one position, one stance, or one technique, in the foreground and just do that. Right.
Related to that, two ideas come up. One is that listeners who have been listening to these Buddhist conversations have probably heard of the Satipatthana Sutta, this one of the core teachings that the Buddha gave on mindfulness meditation. But there's a whole section of the Satipatthana Sutta that's devoted to mind states, or contents of mind, which most people don't ever consider very much, or how to even be with that level of experience. Because they hear the first instructions of being aware of the body and breath and the first foundation of mindfulness, and that's what they tend to hone in on, never really giving the third or fourth foundation its full due. And it's a little, the way I compare that or think about that is it's a little bit like people who are trying to appreciate music, say instrumental music, whether it's a jazz group or an orchestra, and they might be listening but trying to keep their attention honed in on the drums exclusively, right? It's like there's all these other layers to the music.
Music then, but
yeah. It's an element of music. There's a piece of music in that, but it's divorced from all the other contextual elements that give it richness and meaning and value. So anyway, another question I have is maybe coming back
to address that.
Yeah, sure, if you'd like to.
Okay. Because I think it's a good point. Mindfulness practice, traditionally was taught that people would first become aware of their body and bodily sensations, their breath, before moving on to awareness of thoughts and emotions. That it seemed like if people learn the basic body practice and develop concentration on their body, they'd be ready to open up to their thoughts or feelings. And I encountered that in my early Vipassana practice and found that it really actually did the opposite to me. It made me want to be less open to my thoughts and feelings and more focusing on my body and calm states of mind and how to get past my thoughts, how to get underneath them, get to someplace else. It wasn't until I sort of dropped that notion and really considered, well, what am I experiencing when I sit down to meditate? And let me not try to preference any part of my experience, but to be open to whatever emerged. And then I really started to find that my previous practices had cut my thoughts too quickly, or certain emotions were so quickly put into my body, I really didn't know them in any other way. And suddenly I felt like, things were broadening and getting richer and richer. And to me, that started to tell me that my experience was, that I wasn't working so much with a model or trying to organize it as much as trying to just be with it and get to know it, which is why most people come, to meditation, not necessarily to learn a technique or how to manage things sometimes. It's at least, my generation, it was coming to expand your consciousness, to become wiser, and to develop certain qualities of mind. And here I was actually starting to do that when I was deviating from the technique that I was being taught.
Right, and my experience too with being taught to focus on the body first is it's usually premised that if you're able to sustain your attention with the body, you'll be in a better position to then be open to your thoughts and not get lost in them. And I think that, as we've already sort of explored, that approach doesn't necessarily acknowledge, honestly, how much that actually interrupts or prevents thoughts from going on. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the qualities that get developed, and we're sort of coming towards our time, and we may have to have another follow-up conversation down the road. But in terms of the qualities that get developed here, traditionally in Buddhism, there are qualities of mind or being that tend to get labeled as either wisdom qualities, like discrimination, clear awareness, clear comprehension, and then there's sort of heart-based qualities. There are qualities like loving kindness, compassion, mudita, or sympathetic joy, and equanimity. How are these qualities, this will be my final question, how are these qualities ripened or developed in this approach when you're just letting things go on?
Okay, well, I think many times when people try to develop a quality like loving kindness or compassion, they're trying to apply an idea of what kindness and compassion is, or they're trying to create a feeling of kindness or love, and work with that within their meditation practice.
And let me just interject. Traditionally, that's done through a technique where you repeat a phrase, right? You repeat a phrase.
Yeah, you repeat phrases, or you picture people, or you do a visualization, or you use various phrases to help you generate those states and qualities. And there's a certain kind of, say, language around them that people are trying to get the definitive quality, the right kind of loving kindness, the right kind of compassion, and so on. In this approach, it's done receptively. You find that these feelings of loving kindness, of compassion, of sympathetic joy, equanimity, patience, they may be very subtle, hard to notice, but they do come up at times within your experience. And when you reflect back on them, you might find that you start to get your own description of them, your own sense of what this was like at that time. And it may not fit a dictionary definition, but what it will do is give you, say, an actual lived experience, lived state of mind that you can reference, that you can know. Okay, this is the feeling that I kind of see now as one of real loving kindness. These are the thoughts of friendliness that I have, and so that memory actually will reinforce those. It will lodge it into our consciousness much more. And so that's part of the whole cultivation here, is that we're not trying to generate these experiences as much as recollect them, value them, let them come up again, and see that they can slowly kind of become more part of our lives. rather than something that just is a practice we do for half an hour or so, and with the result that we're going to come out feeling more loving and kind and compassionate. Those practices do work for people,
or
but this is a different orientation.
Or they don't work at all. Like for me, those practices, particularly the loving kindness practice, never worked, in the sense that I would go to a mindfulness guided, or a loving kindness guided meditation during a retreat, and get increasingly annoyed at the teacher, and then get increasingly annoyed at myself for getting annoyed at the teacher, and it was a sort of an annoyance spiral. But in this approach, to give an example from my own experience, sitting with, being receptive to more of my experience also got me more in touch with voices of the inner critic, or self-condemnation or self-judgment, and actually sitting with the discomfort of that receptively led me to a change in how I related to it.
Exactly. That's it. The metta, or loving kindness, compassion, is also it's related to conditions, and so how you might be relating to a self-critic in a kinder way is showing you that quality of kindness is present. How to generate it in absence of anything else is to me, what happens is people are trying to basically fabricate an experience. Here you get a live experience of how, a period of being critical and being maybe more receptive and open to it, and kinder around that experience might lead to actually a softening around the critic and a softening around criticism. It might open up to something else.
Right, and I would see that fitting or slotting right into the heart of the Buddha's teachings of the Four Noble Truths, in that by being receptive, one of the things you become receptive to is pain, or to dukkha. You're not trying to manage the dukkha with a technique of going to something else that's more neutral. You're actually facing it head on, and seeing how a full embrace of that, in a way, transforms into deeper understanding around what's fueling it, as you might say, and then what it's like to have that not be fueled, to have it just to be let go of or released.
Right. Well, that's the thing. And kind of like the way I see it around that teaching around pain and suffering, hurt, dukkha, is that our awareness, our self-awareness, is going to show us, different kinds of dukkha, different kinds of pain and suffering. Awareness is not just a neutral thing. It's not entirely safe for us. It's going to show much more about ourselves, and I believe that's what makes the Buddhist teaching even more profound as one continues in practice. Is that you're not only are you, how do you say, having to see certain things about yourself you don't want to see. You're actually in a place now where that has meaning too. That is part of your path and part of your journey through, to find greater liberation, freedom in this life.
The cognitive dissonance has meaning.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I can see we're both flagging a bit.
Yeah. No, this might be a good time to pause. I want to thank you for your time. Really appreciated you being here today. And once again, just want to give a shout out for your book, Thoughts Are Not the Enemy.
Thank you, Josh.
If anybody who's a thinker wants to learn how to meditate, your style is to be recommended.
Thank you so much.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks Jason.
You're welcome. Bye.